Welcome to the Women in Cyber podcast series. I'm your host, Lorene Smith, the VP of Global Strategic Alliances at Excellion, and I'm happy to be here virtually, of course, with our guest, Theresa Payton, who is the CEO of Fortalice Solutions. She's the former White House CIO and best-selling author. She's got 3 books out. The most recent one is Manipulated, which we're going to talk about today. The second one is Privacy in the Age of Big Data. And the third one is Protecting Your Internet Identity. So I know those are all fascinating reads. The one that I've read in more detail is Manipulated, so I can't wait to get into that conversation. But a couple other things about Theresa that you may not know is that she's starred as the Deputy Commander of Intelligence on the CBS TV series Hunted. And she's been featured in the book of 100 Fascinating Females Fighting Cybercrime. And I am super excited to be here with you, Theresa. And I know that you've been on a panel with me before, and it's been, I can say that you are one of the most fascinating cyber females that I've talked to. So welcome to the show.
Lorene, it's always great to be with you. You're an amazing hostess, and I always enjoy the conversation. It goes by so fast, so I'm looking forward to it.
Good. So for our audience, why don't you give an introduction? I mean, I obviously just touched the surface, but be very interesting to hear from you and tell people a little bit about Fortalice. They may not know about Fortalice, and we can go from there.
Sure, absolutely. So Fortalice, I designed the company to be the company that I wish had been around to support me when I worked in the financial services industry, and that I wish had been around to support me when I worked at the White House. And so everything that we do is focused on the human story, human-centered design for cybersecurity and intelligence operations, but also the human story. How is the human interacting with information, technology? What's the mission, vision, and values of the organization that needs our assistance? And at the end of the day, if you think about it, how much of cybercrime relies upon cyber criminals tricking the user into doing something that lets them in the door. So everything we do is very much focused on the user story. And we prefer to be on the proactive side. So we do security engineering work, we do risk assessments and tabletop exercises, but we also provide incident response, so the playbooks that go with the incident response, and then responding to. And everything we do is with white glove service, and we have some proprietary frameworks and algorithms that we've built internally that we don't sell. So we're not a product company. We're very much a services company. We're sort of the CIO's CIO or the CISO's CISO, really trying to help them further their cybersecurity strategy. Our sweet spot is we do have federal contracts, and we have a clearance for those federal contracts. We serve the private sector, so both privately held companies and the Fortune 100, and it's really a great honor to be able to do that. We also serve individuals as well, so think about board members, CEOs, VIPs, very much in the public eye, very much like you would at the White House or some of the Fortune 100 companies. The CEO is very much a target. And so they also need personal security as well. It's really exciting. We're a small and mighty team of 30 people, but we get a lot done.
Well, I know that a lot of the CISOs that I've talked to recently are actually using your services. So that's amazing. So that's kudos to you. So tell us a little bit. I mean, obviously everybody's facing the pandemic now, and it's almost, it's kind of level set everybody dealing with the same thing at the same time, just varying degrees state by state, I guess. But tell us what the new normal looks like for you from work from home situation, and, just kind of what that new normal look is like for you.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. And, I love to share what seems to be working and not working for me, but, I also learn so much from other people. And, kind of the new normal is, I like to tell everybody, like, each morning is an opportunity for resetting the new normal. So what you liked about yesterday, carrying that forward, and what you didn't like about yesterday, looking for an opportunity to tweak it, whether it's your personal or professional part of your schedule. So my new normal is I'm not traveling nearly as much. My last flight up until last week for work was March the 5th. Yes, I flew that much that I actually remember when my last flight was.
Wow.
I did have a client that really needed me to come in person last week. And it was a very strange experience going to the airport and flying, with the mask on and all the different protocols and precautions. But so far, so good with that. But my new normal is really a combination of my office isn't very far away. So a combination of working from home because my kids are in a hybrid situation of schooling from home and schooling in person. And so it's sort of that doing that daily juggle of do I need to be here to make sure I'm also the geek squad for my family. And so making sure the internet is up and kids are logged in and
Right.
fully present, and then getting my stuff done. I would also say the new normal is really evaluating as my clients and their firms necessarily have to reimagine their business processes and innovate at a pace that they aren't used to innovating at, right? So it's like suddenly the red tape is gone and man, we're going contactless
Right.
everything and people are implementing QR codes and all kinds of things that were sort of like on the 3-year roadmap and now it's on the 3-month roadmap.
Right.
And so as they're doing that, anticipating where those shortcuts present privacy and security issues, advising them, not slowing them down, but advising them like just eyes wide open. These are the risks you're signing up for. We got to figure that out later, uh, and deal with that. And then really trying to predict where cyber criminals are headed in 2021, because that's really what this is about. Like you don't want to be responding to, you want to be predicting
Right.
so that when they show up at the front door of your organization, it's like, oh, this is really hard to get in, and hopefully they move on.
Yeah. That's very true. I mean, it's, I just moderated a panel yesterday and we talked about those projects that were on the snail's pace of being implemented to all of a sudden, needing, and a lot of them were related to cloud projects. And you can imagine that, going from on-prem to cloud can, it's not an easy thing to do. And they were just talking about that yesterday where they had to get things done and they were saying, okay, we've got to get it in, but here are the things you need to watch for and you're going to need to address in the coming months, but we've got to get this number one priority thing done. And so, yeah, it's prevalent across the board. So I'll talk a couple questions about how you got your start in cybersecurity and who inspires you, and then we'll get into the book because I know a lot of people are interested in learning about that, and especially me. But how did you get your start in cybersecurity? I know you've had a very an amazing career, and you seem so young, and you've got a lot of experience under your belt. So tell us how you got your start, and how you are now CEO of your own company, which is fantastic, and I know it's quite successful. So tell us how you got your start for people looking to get into cybersecurity.
Sure. I often say, Lorraine, that this is a career that found me. And so people may kind of chuckle if they hear when I came out of graduate school, if you had asked me out of graduate school, so what are you going to do for your career? My answer then very much was, well, I'm going to change the world as a developer of expert systems and artificial intelligence. So that was my career path and goal. And then I'm going to eventually go to law school and then I'm going to run for the US Senate. So that was like, I'm like, and I was somewhere in there, I'll get married and have kids. It'll all kind of work out. And I actually had like a PowerPoint deck of what my life's plan was going to be. And so I always say, like, if you want to make God laugh, like show him your PowerPoint deck for your plan. So I haven't gone to law school. I haven't run for US Senate. That, there's still time.
Yet.
If I can do that, there's still time. And so I did get married and have 3 kids, and I've got 2 rescue Great Pyrenees. So I've got over 200 pounds of dog running around my house too.
Okay.
But funny enough, when I was in high school, my plan was I was taking languages and I wanted to be an international finance lawyer and I wanted to do big deals, kind of like the Wall Street.
Right.
And my daddy got stationed at Quantico Marine Corps Base. He's a Marine. My grandfather's a Marine, retired Marine. My other grandfather, Army Colonel, so long history military. And so we end up at Quantico. My dad's with HMX-1, the presidential helicopters, Reagan as president, and vice president as Vice President Bush, who became POTUS 41.
Right.
So I'm in high school, and the requirement of the Department of Defense high school is you have to take programming classes. It's required.
Wow.
So you take your language class, and you had to take a programming class. You also had to have a lot of PE, but that's like a whole nother conversation. And because it's a military school.
Right.
And so I get into this programming class, and I absolutely love it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm really good at this. I come home, I tell my mom and dad, I'm like, guess what? I got to take a programming class today. And so that set me on a whole path. Like, who knows? If it was an elective, would I have taken the elective?
Right.
Given where I thought my head was? Maybe I would have, maybe I wouldn't have. And so just fascinating. So fast forward, I get an academic scholarship to go to Immaculata University, at the time, all women's college. And I sit down with them and I said, so how many degrees can I get on this scholarship? Had to be employable, yeah. And because at that point, nobody in my family had gone to college straight out of high school.
Okay.
So people had earned their degrees later in life, but not straight out of high school. So I'm like, I have to be employable. I can't have any debt. So I'm like, so how many degrees can I get while I'm here for these 4 years on this scholarship? And so the registrar was like, well, what are you interested in? I'm like, interested in getting as many degrees as I can. And so I told her kind of what I wanted to do with business, and I really like computers. So she said, okay, you can have a major in business administration. You can have a major in economics. So I did a double major, and she's like, and you can get a certification in computers. So I set about kind of doing that thing. And then what's interesting is University of Virginia, as I was getting ready to graduate, they had just started a Master of Science in Management Information Systems, and no women applied.
Oh my God.
And so they started looking for women, and basically they took, because I said, how did you get my name? Because they called me at Immaculata and they said, we bought your name off of a list. I'm like, I'm on a list? Like, is that a good thing or a bad thing? And they're like, no. Yeah. And so again, just to give people just a few steps in the journey. So fast forward, graduate from University of Virginia, my husband's stationed Mayport, Florida. So I get out with, I'm going to do artificial intelligence and expert systems. Where are we stationed? Jacksonville, Florida. Okay. Not really a hotbed like Silicon Valley for expert systems and artificial intelligence, but Barnett Bank, which is now part of Bank of America, took a chance on me, and they basically hired me to start their expert systems journey. So I was their first hire to do that.
Wow.
It was like on a future, maybe strategic plan, and they saw something in me, wanted to take a chance on me. So I get in there, and what I realize when I'm on sort of the front lines of cutting edge technology is I'm on the front lines of fraud and terrorist financing. We didn't even call it cybercrime yet. And it was like that military background, and I have some uncles that were in law enforcement. It just kind of triggered something with me, which was like, this is wrong. Like, I'm trying to create a system you want to use. I'm trying to use cutting edge technology, and all of a sudden these criminals show up, and they're trying to get in between the bank and the customer. And so I always ask to have fraud, risk, and security reporting to me, and people let me have it. So I got to deliver innovative technology with that responsibility, because people are like, if you want that responsibility, great, you can have it. And so fast forward, got the opportunity to work at the White House, start getting read into these classified programs. I have security reporting directly to me, just like I did at the banks. And as far as like kind of for my unit and my implementations. Mm-hmm. And I realized, I came home and told my husband, because I was commuting back and forth every week between the White House and Charlotte. And I said, I can't tell you what I'm learning, but what I am learning is what I thought I knew about the adversary being in banking. It's just one capability, one vertical. There's so much more going on, and I really feel like my life's calling is to really focus on cybersecurity and intelligence ops for everybody. And so so when I left the White House in 2008, so I was there 2006 to 2008, found out I was pregnant with my little girl, Maeve, and interviewing 7 months pregnant, which I didn't care. I was like, I love to work. I'm coming back to work. I'm going to have the baby and I'll be back at work. Right. But I just wasn't finding the company, I'm talking to people about, the reason why bad things happen is because we don't think about the human, and it's the human interaction with technology, feeding it data, getting it data, having that interaction. That's what puts the information at risk and puts these critical infrastructure at risk. And let's talk about human stories and human-centered design. This is, 2008. And as you can imagine, Laureen, you've been in this business. People are like, no, we talk about firewalls, we talk about systems, we talk about telling business units no. And so I'm telling my husband, and he said, you know what? Corporate America will always be there. Just start your own company. Do it your way. And I said, we don't do entrepreneurship in this family. We're military. He was military. Like, we're military, or we end up working for corporate America. And he was like, just give it a shot. If you don't like it, you can always go back to corporate America. So here I am.
Wow, that is an amazing story. And I think kind of the one takeaway, there's many takeaways, but you just have to ask. If you ask for it. And I totally understand that. It's just one of the things that I've done too, is just you get driven by something, and you just need to stand up and ask for it. And usually you get it.
Yes, it's funny. I'll say, can I have responsibility for this? They're like,
right.
Really? Great. Okay, it's yours.
There you go. Exactly. Wow. Well, that's fantastic. And I know that you're obviously an author. You've written 3 books. And so what inspires you? Just, I can tell you're very passionate about cybercrime, cybersecurity, which is awesome. And I can tell why. You told the story about that. What moved you and kind of inspired you to write books?
Really just having a larger platform to reach more people. Mm-hmm. I get these phone calls every day of victims whose lives are ruined through no fault of their own. Either they're being stalked, revenge pornography, their identity's been stolen, and they've done absolutely nothing wrong. And there's nobody to help them. And so I thought, I have to write a guide for people and be the translator and write it. I understand all the ins and outs of cyber criminal syndicates and nation states and cyber operatives and lone wolves, and because I've worked on so many cases, but like, how do I translate it for everybody who just wants to live their life and be left alone? They don't want to be victims of crimes. And so that's what really inspired me. And the first 2 books I wrote with a lawyer who's a very well-regarded privacy and security lawyer, Ted Claypool, who's also a great friend. And it was really a great journey to be able to work with him on these, because there's no legal protections for people, and there's not even a lot of court law. I mean, it's becoming more court law, but the victim, here's the thing, like, if I tracked the person down who did it to you, how do I get handcuffs on them and have them serve time? Like, how do I get justice for the victim? Right? Because oftentimes either the company or the government organization or the individual's life is absolutely ruined. It's in shatters. And it's like, how do I help people get their life back? And so it was just illuminating writing those first 2 books with Ted, and depressing to see how little the laws really protect all of us. With Manipulated, I was observing some of my clients be the victims of reputation issues. And a lot of it was through misinformation and manipulation campaigns. So, think about an industry like fracking, for example, and really challenged to combat these reputation management issues, and on their heels. And when you're explaining, you're losing. And so I was inspired to write about this, and I went to my book agent. She's incredible, Joelle, and she's been in the business a long time, is very savvy, and represents a lot of great authors. And so when I went to her with it, she's like, well, what's the fix for this? So this is like 2016. I'm like, I have this idea for this this before really the presidential cycle was completed and we knew what happened. And she said, well, what's the fix? I said, there isn't one. Like, you just have to be ready. You have to be ready with a playbook in case you become a target. She's like, well, that's depressing. Nobody wants to read a nonfiction book. That's scary, where there's no fix. I'm like, well, the fix is being aware. And she's like, no. She's like, it's not going to sell. She was totally right. So then when the 2016 revelations started to come out about Cambridge Analytica and the Mueller investigation, And I called her. She's like, well, we're going to learn everything there is to know when Mueller puts out his report, which was quite long. And I'm probably one of 5 people outside of Mueller's team that actually read the full report multiple times. And so I kept coming back to her. And finally she said, you know what? I think you're onto something here. Because I said, it's not just the US, it's global. It's not going away. And what the Mueller report uncovered is actually part of the plausible deniability scheme of nation states, which is they didn't want to get found out, but if they were going to get found out, that was the unit to get found out, if you catch my drift.
Right.
I mean, you read,
right.
you read the beginning part of my book where I admit that I'm a conspiracy theorist who's been raised by a family of conspiracy theorists, but because I know that about myself, I actually test multiple hypotheses. But yeah, so that's what inspired.
I think you have to think that way. I think that's one of the, I mean, you're passionate about this. I mean, you have to think that way, I think, in order to get, especially to the level that you did in your book. I mean, I think it's amazing. The intrigue is fascinating. So
I just hope, Laureen, that my 2020 fictional story / kind of prediction, I'm incredibly worried because, as you know, kind of a little bit of spoiler alert for people listening in, I actually predict a contested election. And remember, I wrote this book last year.
Right.
I predicted a contested election and the international community having to get involved. So
oh my God.
I'm very concerned.
I know. I mean, especially after this, we talked about this before we started recording, but the debate that happened, what a timely thing. I mean, it was, I don't know. It just is going to be interesting to see where we go in another 30 days. So, yeah, I think you're right. So we'll see, see about that. So actually we had a couple people, and this may be out of order, but from an intrigue standpoint, I posted that I was going to be speaking to you. I posted it on LinkedIn, and somebody commented, be sure to ask her about the HackerX chapter. That was the most amazing, and all American voters should be told about that. And I think just given the timing of where we are with our current election and everything that's gone into it for the past 6 months, you know, heaped on top of the COVID heaped on top of it, it's just an incredible situation of where we are right now. And I know, like, obviously you wrote the book last year. How could you know? How could you predict? But you did. You've got the silver ball, right? to see what's the crystal ball. But talk to the audience about that chapter. And I know, I mean, obviously you can read the book, but people may not read the book. But talk to us about what it was like and to interview HackerX, and what the lessons learned from that, if you could summarize that.
Sure. And you know, kind of for the record, as you know from reading the book, I continue to be conflicted about my emotions, about what he told me. And he and I actually still stay in touch through his handler. He is not conducting campaigns. He isn't. So I put on social media that I was writing this book, and I basically invited people to contact me if they were a victim of a manipulation campaign or if they were a manipulator. And so he actually went to somebody he and I know in common. I still do not know his name, and I told him that was the best way to protect him. But he went to somebody that we know in common, and he said, I have a crazy story that my family doesn't know, my wife doesn't know, nobody knows. And I want to tell it, and I want you to be there when I tell it. And I want you to be my handler to protect my identity. And I've done my research on Theresa Payton. I see that she knows you, and I want to tell her my story. And he was like, did you murder anybody? Like that was like his handler. He's like, did you murder somebody? He goes, no, but I did something incredible. And I don't know how I feel about what I did. Wow. And so, as you know, from reading the chapter, so I interviewed him several times for hours and hours at a time, and I would be spent. So much of it is not in the book because I had to make decisions around protecting him, but also not making the chapter too long. But I was worried too much could lead his people who paid him to know that he spoke. So I'm less concerned because they had lawyers on staff, and he stayed in that gray area of the lack of law. He bent the heck out of those guardrails, but he stayed in that gray area. So it's less about what he did was illegal. I just feel like these are very wealthy, powerful people. I don't know who they are either. I can take a guess. So I did want him to get found out, but I finally got to meet him in person. And and so of course we were in a facility where you had to have security to get in, and he actually had his own alternate identity and a official badge printed that met the muster of security.
Wow.
He's a genius. He's not currently engaged in these manipulation campaigns, but what I'll say for people, you definitely want to read the book. And for people who are super busy, by the way, there's an audio book. So you can listen to it like a podcast. Like my mother says, it's the best audio book she's ever listened to. It is read in my voice. So of course, my mom would say that, but you could do it sort of in a podcast format, and each chapter, as you know, is meant to be, you could digest each chapter alone. You don't have to read it sequentially. So you could jump first to HackerX. And what was interesting about that in-person meeting was that's when I got to ask him more specifically about how he felt about what he did and what he pulled off. And he has mixed emotions. Like, he marvels at what he did, and he says he would do it again. And he said he would do it again for the right candidate. And then 2 sentences later, he says he would never do it again, and he's disgusted by what he did.
Wow.
He built the operation to assuming he would be found out. So he built everything and had a self-destruct button after election day, and it's completely evaporated. And the other thing that was shocking to me was how much money he made for the people he was working for.
Right.
So, his 3 objectives, and then, I'll kind of leave it there. His 3 objectives that he was given was never get caught, help us make sure that she doesn't get elected. It was actually more about not letting Clinton get elected.
Right.
And then the third was make us a ton of money. And he accomplished all 3.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. And it leads into the next subject of this misinformation campaigns affecting multiple industries, not just one. I mean, you talk about that impacting and affecting an election, which obviously is super relevant right now, because you just, the intrigue for me is you just wonder, what is going on now? What has gone on behind the scenes leading up to where we are now from the election standpoint? But then you take it to even a personal level, like you say, it can happen to anybody. And it's not just Americans. It's not just Russia doing the attacks. It just really makes you kind of go back on your heels and think twice. But talk to us about the campaign. You're talking about the campaigns that do impact industries, not just the election. So what's your perspective on that?
Well, first of all, for the free press, so newspapers, news organizations on TV and radio, they are under assault by nation state operatives. So think, they own their media. They can publish anything they want, and then they cross-post whatever they put. And they are definitely attacking, whether it's the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the BBC. So nation state operatives do not like the free media. And so they are doing everything they can to discredit trusted, vetted reporting and journalism. Because if they do that, they open you up to believing anything, because you don't know who and what to believe. So the discrediting, I mean, it's not just their lives are in danger, which that is the other thing too. And I write about that in the book. There are many reporters who have been discredited, embarrassed, shamed into silence. But the discrediting of trusted, vetted news media by cyber operatives that are nation state sponsored is alive and well and scary. And I get it. In America, like, who needs nation states when we do that to ourselves? We've got leaders that discredit the media, but the danger is really there, and I'm quite concerned about that. The other thing that I would say industry-wise for people to be thinking about where this is kind of, so that's one industry, so media and news. The other industry is fracking, and whether you like fracking or not, and there's science that talks about the risks with fracking, but whether you like it or not, what fracking is a part of is America's energy independence. And with our energy independence, not only do we look at conflicts around the globe differently and what our involvement is and isn't going to be, but we also, the price of energy is lower. So who would be upset about low energy prices? Possibly the Middle East, maybe Canada. Who else? Russia. So I found in my research that other organizations found this as well, was that Russian cyber operatives were actually very much of an amplification campaign. So truths about risks with fracking and the oil pipeline between Canada and the United States, but then also misinformation and manipulation campaigns, and behaving as if they were everyday Canadian citizens and US citizens objecting to the pipeline, stoking the fires between Trudeau and Trump and whether or not they were getting along and what they were saying about each other, you know, sort of the petty side of politics and policy, and then a whole anti-fracking campaign. And the reason being is Russia needs energy prices to go up because that's how Putin funds his economic ambitions. So every industry, if you get on the wrong side of a nation state, could potentially be a victim of a manipulation and misinformation campaign. I have seen unscrupulous business competitors also conduct this against other businesses. So if they're competing on a bid or there's M&A activity, I've been brought in to do the forensics on that. It's not pretty, but it really does happen. I know it sounds like the things that maybe a Netflix or HBO show is made of, but it's real because I've worked on these cases, these misinformation cases. So those are just a couple examples, and where everybody could be at risk.
So I know that you don't have all the answers, but are there things that you can do, that companies can do to, you know, minimize this risk?
I mean, for starters, have a playbook. So just, you know, create a playbook with your leadership team that says, what if somebody creates deepfake video, deepfake audio, deepfake documents, and accuses us of something that puts our reputation at risk? What's the playbook? Who gets called first? Do we have a PR firm who knows how to deal with that? Does our legal team know how to deal with that? What if somebody claims, you know, they've got inside conversations, whatever it is, and just kind of practice that terrible disaster and make sure you know exactly what you're going to do. Minutes matter. These things do not get better with time. You cannot ignore it. So how are you going to deal with it head on? So have that playbook, and hopefully you'll never need it. That's kind of the first thing. You know, the second thing would be, you know, to really understand, you know, either have an internal intelligence operation or hire somebody to help you to really understand how prevalent it is. You know, oftentimes we'll get a phone call and say, you know, somebody called me and they said when they did a Google search, these things came up, and then, you know, what's it going to take to clean it up? And we'll say, well, let us get back to you. And then we go look, and it's like, it's all over Reddit. It's all over, you know, Pastebin. It's all over every social media platform. It's a trending hashtag. Like, and they don't realize it's not just about like, let's make it go away in Google search. And I'm going to pick up the phone and magically somebody will answer my call and I can make this go away.
Never happens.
No. Yeah. Never happens. And you know, even a cease and desist letter. So you really want to have that playbook and really understand, and even have things like boilerplate language. Like, we understand today that this, you know, fill in the blank has been said about our company, just so you understand, we're committed to diversity and inclusion, or whatever it is. And, you know, we're trying to understand, and we'll be back to you. I mean, oftentimes a quick response that's transparent and says, we don't have all the answers, but here's a phone number to call, or whatever. And even like a quick video or something that's authentic. Sounds like a lawyer sent it. People will know. So that's the other piece is you can have the lawyers bless it, but it needs to be authentic, whatever the messaging is.
Yeah, you have to have a BCP-DR plan for that type of yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately, yes, that's the
Right.
reality we live in.
Yeah. So we just have a few more minutes left here, and I'm curious. Obviously, hopefully by now people will know they need to go read this book, and it's definitely super interesting. And I actually wish I had known that there was an audiobook. So, but nowadays I'm not traveling in my car, so used to listen to podcasts all the time, and that's one thing I've missed is listening. So, but anyway, people can get it there. That's awesome. But is there anything else you'd like to leave the audience with, just in terms of, important points from the book? And of course, they'll get all the details when they read it.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is people watching right now may think, oh, I'm very well educated on this topic, so I'm good. Chances are your friends, colleagues, neighbors, and loved ones need the book. And so they can, you can get it for them. But I would say that the kind of the biggest thing to take away by age group is for anybody who's in that early voting age of 18 through 25. I did a master class for that age group last year and just sort of kind of putting together the final aspects of the book. And I will tell you, I taught them how to spot manipulation and misinformation campaigns. And after a while, they got really good. But guess what? They always got wrong. Always, always, always.
The social media or
Internet
Instagram.
memes. Internet memes. So a meme.
Oh, meme, yeah.
Or a TikTok video that's satire. They don't understand that they're being manipulated because they see it as organic, personally generated, so it's authentic.
Right.
And they don't realize that it could be nefarious political operatives or nation states. And then as you go through each demographic, they have their own challenges with not understanding, because of confirmation bias, that they are being manipulated into believing misinformation. So the book will help every age group. It's not just for this election. It's not just for the United States. I cover like all the global operatives and what's going on. And then what I would say is I always tell people, factcheck.org and Snopes can be your really good friends with helping your family. So you don't need to argue with them. Just say, hey, I thought that was really interesting, so I looked it up here. Bam, and just send it to them.
Right.
And and you don't need to do it publicly on their Facebook page or wherever they're posting this stuff. You can just kind of reach out to them. The other thing I say is, have 3 sources: trusted, vetted local source, trusted, vetted national source, trusted, vetted international source.
Right.
And if you don't see it trending across all 3, maybe you're falling prey to bias.
Right. That's very good. Yeah, I know when I read the part about the teaching these kids, I thought, wow, I better go learn that because I need to do a better job of identifying that type of information. So, and I'm sure it's the same for millions of people out there. So it's so critical. I'm really happy to have talked to you about this book. I'm glad that you wrote the book. And I'm looking forward to further conversation with you. So I really appreciate it. So thank you very much for joining the Women in Cyber interview on CISO Street.
Thanks for having me. Always great to talk to you. Have me back, Laureen.
Thank you.